All right, so here is Fusion 360. And what you can do to operate this software, you can kind of scroll around and use the mouse wheel, again, to zoom in and zoom out. You can use this box up here to change the orientation that you're looking at. So if I click on a part of this box, hold the mouse down, I can kind of rotate it up and down and left and right. And if I want to go to a particular part and get a kind of good view that's good for an overall 3D view of whatever I'm drawing, I can click on the little house icon, and that'll kind of give me a good centered view. And the way Fusion 360 works is instead of dragging and dropping 3D shapes, you work in 2D and you kind of draw some sketches and then you extrude these into 3 dimensions. So what we start with in Fusion is you start with creating something called a sketch. So I'm going to go up here to the upper left and I'm going to select Create Sketch. And then I can select whichever plane I want to work on. So I can work between these blue and red lines, that'd be the XY plane. I can work in the XZ plane between this blue and green line, or the YZ plane between this red and green line. You can pick whichever plane you want to start working on and draw in, and just click on it. And then it'll give you kind of an overhead 2D view. And then you can start drawing your design. Your design is drawn with all of these little features up here in the Create option. So here under Create, I can draw lines, rectangles, circles, lots of different things that I can draw. So let's just pick one of these and we'll draw a circle. So I'm going to draw a circle. And I'm just going to randomly pick a place to draw it and draw that circle. And this is a center formed circle. Now what I can do, and what I want to do is I want to convert this circle so that it's what we call constrained. So I want to change the color of this line surrounding the circle from blue to black. Black means that it's a fully constrained model. To do that, I use these things called constraints up here. And there's all sorts of different constraints I can do too. And you can play around with these to figure out how to use them in your designs. I'm going to use this thing called a coincident constraint. And I'm going to constrain this circle to lay in a specific position. So if I click on coincident, we can read and see that this means that it will constrain the position of 2 points, or a point and a line or curve together. So I can constrain where this circle is going to be. So let me click on this, and I'm going to click on the center of this circle, and I'm going to click on the origin. So that's going to constrain that the origin of this circle will always be at the origin of my coordinate system, where these 2 axes meet. Okay, and we notice that we're still not quite fully constrained because the diameter or size of this circle isn't quite set into stone. So to do that, I can constrain it in any number of ways. And the way I'm going to show you to constrain it is to create a user-driven constraint. So what I'm going to do is go up here to Modify, and under Modify, I can go Change Parameters. And under Change Parameters, this is where I can let a user enter in a value. So I'm going to enter in a user parameter here. I'm going to hit this plus button, and I'm going to give it a name, diameter. And then I'm going to just enter an expression, so I can enter in, say I want the circle to be 30 millimeters. I can enter in the number 30 here. And that will constrain that to be 30 millimeters. I could change these units to whatever measurement I want. I can do angles, currency, all sorts of different constraints I can do. I can even give it no units if I wanted. Okay, so I've got 30 millimeters, and let me comment and say that that's diameter of a circle. Okay, so when I click OK, that gives me this name is diameter, and there's this constraint. Okay, so if I want to constrain a sketch that I draw, I can do this by hitting the D key, and I click on my circle. And you see that brings up the measurement here, this diameter. And if I click on that, that brings up the measurement. I can type in a number, or I can type in this user-driven dimension, this diameter variable that I created. And when I click and hit Enter, that's going to constrain this now. So this circle has a constraint. It is constrained to be a circle of 30 millimeters, which is the user entered constraint that I have. I can do other things now and draw other things and other constraints on top of this. I can draw a rectangle. So let's draw a rectangle, just a random rectangle here. And I can, let's make this rectangle sit on the outside of this circle. So I can do that by using this tangent constraint. So I can click this tangent constraint. I can click this side of the rectangle, and I can click the side of this circle. So then that's going to constrain this to be tangent. I can also, let's constrain the midpoint of this rectangle to be at the center of this circle. So when I click that, what you'll find is it says, failed to solve. Please try revising dimensions or constraints. So what this means is the constraint that you picked is not possible. You cannot actually constrain it in that way. So this might happen if you're not planning ahead, and this is why it's very important to plan your sketches. Okay, and what you want to do is make sure that you fully constrain all of your sketches. So right now this sketch isn't fully constrained. Can we guess why? And the reason why is because this rectangle, the size, can be anything. Okay, so what I could do is I could come up here to modify, I could go to change parameters, and I could put a user-generated constraint. I could do a width, let's say a width of 10, and let's call that width of rectangle. And I could do a user parameter of height. And let's make the height 5. And I can do height of rectangle as a comment. And click OK. Now let's close that and apply those constraints. So I'm going to hit the D key and click on this horizontal line. And let's set this to be the value width. So now that width is constrained, and I can make sure that that happens. Okay, and now the height here, I can set the height of this. That's set the height. So it is still not turning black. Why isn't it turning black? Because it's not fully constrained yet. This rectangle can be anywhere. So this line is constrained to be parallel to this circle, but I haven't constrained the horizontal dimension. So I need to constrain that. I need to set a value, set a place where this horizontal line has to be. So I can do a whole sorts of different options. I can choose any of these constraints. Let's see what horizontal vertical does. So if I click on the horizontal line, horizontal vertical, it's telling me that constraint has already been applied, so I can't use that one. Coincident constraint. Can I make this coincident? Yes. So what I've done here is I've set this horizontal line to be coincident with the center of this circle. So this rectangle will always be in this position. Now I can change and modify how big this rectangle is by changing these parameters. So if I come here, let's move this box and size it down just a little bit. I can change the width of my rectangle. Let's make it 20. And hit enter, and when I do that, it dynamically changes the size of this. I can change the height of this to be 20, and it dynamically changes the size of this. But notice that because I fully constrained this, I constrained that this side of the rectangle has to be tangent to the circle, and this horizontal part of the rectangle has to lie along the center line, has to be kind of equal to this center of the circle. This is where this position, relative position, is always going to be. So I've constrained this now. And then a couple other interesting and cool things we can do. We can repeat this pattern. We can repeat this rectangle using this create and come down to here to either a circular or a rectangular pattern. So I can let's see what the rectangular pattern does. I can select some objects. So let me select that rectangle that I've drawn, and I can use these arrows to kind of draw more rectangles. I can go down and up and side to side and create additional rectangles however I want in whatever pattern I want. This is kind of useful for drawing all sorts of designs. So now I've designed this, I've drawn this, and this is fully constrained again because all these lines, they're all black. And that is your goal when you are drawing these things out. You want your designs to be fully constrained. The other way you know that you're fully constrained is when you come over here into the sketch, on the left-hand side of the screen, and you see a little lock here. Again, that means fully constrained. And then the last thing that I want to show you is that you can actually add some nice little smoothness to your designs, which you often want to do in the form of what's called a fillet. So this fillet, you can use this in 3D, or you can do this in just the 3D designs, 2D designs that you're doing. So if I click on fillet here, I can then change the roundness of this. So now this is going to be rounded, and I can finish this sketch. And when I look at this now, by doing that fillet, you can see I unconstrained all of these other rectangles. because I changed the rectangle that they started off with. So now these other ones are no longer constrained. So you have to be very careful when you start applying fillets before you change patterns. So keep all of that in mind as you're making your designs. This is a very complex process and requires lots and lots of practice. The only way you're going to get an idea of how it works is to actually do it. Okay, the final thing that we want to do, because we don't want 2D designs, that's boring. We want to make these things 3D. To make these things 3D, we use the extrude option. So here under extrude, I can click on this, and then I can select little profiles of whatever I've drawn. And then I can extrude these out into 3 dimensions. So let's do that. Take this. And then if I come over to this right-hand upper corner and click on this cube, I can rotate this around so that I'm looking at it from a different view. So let's look at it from the bottom, from kind of a side view. And I can drag this up and make a nice 3D shape. So now I've made a nice little 3D shape. I've made a nice little fork kind of shape. And what I can do with this fork, I can also apply fillets to the fork. I can apply 3D fillets. So I can select these edges. See how these aren't kind of joined together very well? I can select this fillet. And if I change that, that can join them together a little bit better. I can also change fillets on some of these corners and make it look a little bit smoother, make it look a little bit nicer as I change these fillets. So I get some nice kind of fork-like shape here. And I can select multiple different sizes, shapes, and get nice fillets. Okay. And other things I can do any of these modify features. I could do a chamfer. A chamfer is just going to kind of do a direct arch. And anytime you attempt to apply or modify something, you might get errors. That means that you cannot apply that change. So you need to be careful and you need to plan ahead. And as you plan very well and learn how to do that planning, you won't have those problems where you kind of can't do a modification that you try to do. And then last of all, let's actually make this look like a fork. So let's change the appearance of this. And we can change the appearance to metal, and let's make a blue metal fork. So there we go. We have created a blue metal fork design, and we can display it down here in the display settings in an environment that instead of being this kind of white background, let's make it a gray room. And let's go to our grid and turn off that little layout grid. So now we can see our fork design. Okay, so that's a basic kind of introduction to some features of Fusion 360 that you're going to use to create a fidget spinner that we can change parametrically based on user parameters that I could enter in here.